Hello and welcome back to the Geo Insight, where we bring you sharp, in-depth looks at global geopolitics and current affairs. Today we're diving into a major rupture in North American trade relations, a moment that has broad implications for economies, neighbors, and the idea of free trade itself. We're talking about how the world's longest undefended border between the United States and Canada is suddenly not acting like friendly neighbors, but like adversaries in a trade war. Stay with us as we unpack what happened, why it matters, and where things might go from here. To understand the current clash, we need some background. Under President Donald Trump, the U.S. adopted an aggressive posture on trade, imposing tariffs on many imported goods and setting a tone of economic nationalism and protectionism. Canada, as one of America's top trading partners, found itself squarely in the crosshairs. Steel, aluminum, autos. These sectors are deeply integrated across the border, so any disruption is felt wide and deep in both economies. From Canada's side, the stakes are enormous. Roughly 3/4 of Canadian exports go to the U.S. daily. What started as diplomatic annoyance evolved into real economic tension, and now we have a flashpoint. A controversial advertisement by the government of Canada's largest province, Ontario, an immediate U.S. response that suspended all trade talks. Let's zoom in. In mid-October 2025, Ontario Premier Doug Ford launched a major ad campaign in the United States, reportedly costing around 75 million Canadian dollars, targeting Republican-leaning American regions. The ad featured audio of former U.S. President Ronald Reagan from a 1987 radio address. In that address, Reagan warned that high tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. The message: Canada is being unjustly punished by U.S. tariffs, and this should matter to American workers too. From the U.S. side, President Trump exploded. He called the ad fraudulent and claimed Canada fraudulently used a Reagan speech to interfere in the U.S. Supreme Court's decision on tariffs. He announced on social media that all trade negotiations with Canada are terminated. This is a remarkable escalation. The ad itself might sound niche, but the consequence is massive. Now, let's unpack why this matters. There are three key dimensions: economic, political, and symbolic. Economic: the U.S. and Canada share one of the largest bilateral trade relationships in the world. Disrupting that risks supply chain shockwaves, job losses, and price increases. For Canada, tariffs against steel, autos, and other goods mean its industries face direct pressure. At the same time, Canada may retaliate or look elsewhere for trade partners. For the U.S., a breakdown with Canada raises the risk that American firms lose access to Canadian supply chains and that American workers face disruption. Political: domestically, in the U.S., President Trump has made tariffs and economic nationalism a central plank of his political brand. This reaction plays into that narrative. I won't be shown up by a neighbor. For Canada, Premier Ford's ad shows a bold move. He is addressing the American electorate, directly challenging a U.S. president's trade policy. That's extraordinary for a provincial leader. On the global stage, other countries will watch closely. This sets a precedent for how Canada acts vis-à-vis the U.S. and how the U.S. responds to such moves. Symbolic: the use of Ronald Reagan, a Republican icon known for his free trade instincts, in a Canadian ad criticizing U.S. tariffs is loaded. It signals that trade isn't purely about economics. It's about identity, sovereignty, and influence. Let's lay out the timeline to clarify exactly how events unfolded. In early October 2025, Canada and the U.S. were in ongoing negotiations to resolve the tariffs the U.S. had imposed on Canadian exports like steel and aluminum. These talks had been uneasy but ongoing. Around mid-October, Ontario launched the ad campaign in the U.S., using excerpts from Reagan's 1987 address. The campaign ran on major U.S. networks in Republican districts and was explicitly directed at the American public. On the 24th of October 2025, President Trump posted on his social platform, "The Ronald Reagan Foundation has just announced that Canada has fraudulently used an advertisement, which is fake. Based on their egregious behavior, all trade negotiations with Canada are hereby terminated." The U.S. claimed the ad interfered with the judiciary and misrepresented Reagan's words. The Reagan Foundation said the ad used selective audio and video without permission. Canada responded with caution. Prime Minister Mark Carney said Canada would not tolerate unfair market access if talks break down. The incident effectively puts the broader trade talks on hold, at least for now, shaking confidence in a stable U.S. Canada trade framework. We should step back to the bigger picture. We live in an era where many believed in trade liberalization. Regional pacts and global supply chains made cross-border commerce the norm. Yet, over the last decade, there's been a resurgence of protectionism, populism, and strategic decoupling. The U.S. Canada episode is a microcosm of this shift. Trade being weaponized not only for economics, but for politics and influence. Interestingly, the ad used the voice of Reagan, a president often associated with conservative politics, to make the free trade case. That underlines how trade ideology has shifted. Reagan may have backed limited tariffs for specific cases, but broadly, he supported open markets. Now, the U.S. under Trump is aggressively using tariffs and trade negotiations to assert leverage. And Canada is responding not just via diplomacy, but through a public campaign in the U.S., reflecting frustration with being treated as a junior partner. What could this escalated dispute lead to? Let's consider possible scenarios. Risk scenario A: deepening trade war. If talks stay frozen, tariffs stay in place, or increase, retaliatory measures may worsen the downturn. Canadian industries may suffer, but so will U.S. importers and supply chains, leading to economic ripple effects. Other countries may use the vacuum to shift supply chains away from North America, reducing the region's competitiveness. Risk scenario B: strategic decoupling. Canada may accelerate diversifying its trade portfolio beyond the U.S., turning more to Europe, Asia, or other regions. This could weaken the long-term economic integration of North America, which has been a geopolitical strength. Outcome scenario: negotiation, reset, or de-escalation. The freeze might force both sides back to the table with tougher mandates. Canada could make concessions in exchange for tariff relief. The U.S. might extract strategic commitments on supply chains or national security issues. A deal could emerge, but the clock is ticking. Trust is eroding, and the next negotiation window might be tighter. Wild card: domestic politics. For Trump and the U.S., this plays into electoral and ideological dynamics. Being tough on trade enemies. For Canada, provincial actors like Ontario are asserting themselves, and the federal government may have to respond or accommodate. Any change in leadership or policy could flip the dynamic quickly. You might ask, why should someone in another country care about a U.S.-Canada trade spat? Here's why. Global supply chains. Many consumer products are assembled across continents. When North America shifts its trade architecture, cost and sourcing adjustments are felt globally. Trade precedent: the U.S.-Canada episode becomes a blueprint. If large-scale established trade relationships can be disrupted, smaller ones are even more fragile. Investment flows. Countries that rely on U.S. or Canadian investment will watch to see if North America remains open or turns inward. Lessons in diplomacy. This conflict shows how soft tools like advertising campaigns can trigger major economic responses. That's a shift in how trade friction can target public opinion, not just tariffs. Let's summarize the key takeaways for this story. 1. Trade is no longer just about economics. It's about messaging, political identity, leverage, and symbolism. 2. Even long-standing allies can become adversaries when structural trade pressures rise and domestic politics demand action. 3. Public campaigns matter in diplomacy. Ontario's ad in the U.S. triggered a presidential trade response. 4. Diversification is vital. Countries dependent on one partner face risk when that partner becomes unstable. 5. The environment of global trade is shifting from liberalization to transactionalism, from integration to conditional cooperation. 6. Watch the next move. Will both sides de-escalate or deepen the split? That outcome may shape North America's trade architecture for years. Here are a few upcoming developments to keep an eye on. The case before the U.S. Supreme Court concerning the legality of Trump's sweeping tariffs. Canada's next moves. Will it retaliate further? Will it pivot trade strategy away from the U.S.? U.S. domestic politics. Any shift in administration or congressional power could alter tariff strategy. Global trade ripple effects. Will other nations emulate this behavior or form new trade blocs? Supply chain shifts. Firms in Canada, the U.S., and beyond may start relocating production or sourcing differently to hedge risk. So, there you have it. Trade diplomacy turned into an adverse escalation. A provincial government targeting American voters, a U.S. president declaring all talks over, and two allies trading threats rather than handshakes. For viewers of the Geo Insight, this is a reminder that geopolitics happens everywhere, not just in war zones or far-off regions, but across borders you may think are friendly and stable. If you enjoy this breakdown and want more deep dives into global current affairs, trade shifts, and how they affect you, hit the like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Leave a comment below. What do you think happens next with the U.S. Canada trade relationship? Will they patch it up, dig further in, or something else entirely? Thanks for watching the Geo Insight. Let's keep our eyes on the world and never take peace for granted. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more global geopolitics from the Geo Insight. See you next time.